EMV AID rules. What is an AID? AID stands for Application Identifier. Every card that uses EMV has an AID or AIDs stored on the chip. AIDs determine what type of card is being used and how to process the card. The AIDs that are accepted by the card processing network are stored on the processing terminal. In order for a device to process an EMV card, the terminal and the card must have matching AIDs. While AIDs are standardized globally, the AIDs accepted by your payment processor may vary. AIDs are instrumental in the determination of how a card is processed by the network service provider. They also affect the screen prompts on the PIN pad for various cards they represent. What happens when multiple AIDs match? The customer inserts the card into the EMV slot on the PIN pad. The EMV application ID selection occurs immediately after the customer inserts their card into the PIN pad. If multiple AIDs match on the terminal and the card, then the PIN pad will prompt the customer to select which AID to use. This is a common scenario for U.S.-issued debit cards where a U.S. Common Debit AID is present, allowing the merchant to choose a network for routing debit card transactions. How are AIDs chosen during the payment process? The customer's choice on the prompted screen will determine which AID is used for processing. For example, a prompt may appear for the customer to select between Visa Debit or US Debit. If the customer selects Visa Debit, it will process the card using the associated AID number, ending in 31010. And if the customer selects US Debit, then the terminal will process the card using AID number ending in 9800840. In the event only one AID exists, then no prompt will appear on the PIN pad and the card will process with that AID. What are AID rules? Verifone POS configuration of EMV allows for AID rules to be created. AID rules were designed to support the U.S. Common Debit implementation that gives merchants a choice as to what AIDs will take precedence over others on cards that might have multiple AIDs. AID rules configuration is a result of the Durbin Amendment, which is a federal law with several provisions regulating the debit card industry in the U.S. One of the provisions mandates that merchant acquirers provide a choice of networks to merchants for routing the debit card transactions. The law requires that all debit card transactions support at least 2 unaffiliated networks. Setting up an AID rule. EMV will operate without any changes to the current AID setup. Implementing AID rules should be considered advanced configuration and only undertaken by individuals with the complete understanding of AID selection. Verifone is not responsible for configuration changes made in AID rules. Contact the front-end processor or merchant service provider to assist with determining the appropriate AID order for rules. AID rules are configured through Configuration Client, Payment Controller, EPS Configuration, EPS Global Configuration, and the EMV Configuration tab. Rules are added at the bottom of the EMV configuration window. Multiple rules can be configured for different scenarios. Displayed are the U.S. Common Debit cards that we will set up for our example. Locate the first AID in the list on the left. Select the AID and then click the Add button. Locate the second AID on the list and then click the Add button again. The AID that will take priority must be the first in the list. You can use the Move Up or Move Down buttons on the right-hand side of the selected AID list to reorder the AIDs. Click the Add button at the bottom of the page once you've finished adding and ordering the AIDs. We have placed the Visa US Common Debit AID first, which means that if a customer uses a bank-issued debit card, that it will process through the AID for US Common Debit rather than the Visa Debit if the card contains the AIDs for both. To add another rule, follow the same process of locating the AIDs in the list and selecting the Add button to move them over to the selected AIDs list. Once they are ordered correctly, click the Add button at the bottom of the page. We have placed the MasterCard US Common Debit first in this example. Similar to the first example, if the customer uses a debit card which has two AIDs, the terminal will utilize the US Common Debit option. Be aware that multiple AIDs may need to be added as they vary based on the customer's card. To update the PIN pad with the newly created rules, be sure to log out of sales mode and back in. Additional guidance. The EMV Feature Reference Guide can be utilized to provide information on how to set up EMV and additional network configuration. If you are not sure which AIDs to configure for your location, contact your front-end processor to determine which order is best for your configuration. Thanks for watching Verifone's training video on AID rules. Please check out our other informational videos on Verifone's YouTube training channel.